Welcome to my YouTube channel, Watercolor Impressions. This video is continuation of Absolute Beginners for Watercolors. Last week we learned how to paint skies, and this week we'll focus on how to paint trees. I'll provide all the reference, practice templates in the video description. Please feel free to download it. And let's get started, guys. Let's paint some happy little trees, and this is dedicated to Bob Ross. So whenever you paint trees, the key thing to keep in mind is to not to paint from our head, because we see trees every day in our day-to-day life. So this is a simple looking tree, and I'll take my round brush and I flare out my bristles in my brush, and you could see it gives a different kind of varieties of edges for me. When I do this, I'll rotate my brushes in different ways so that I don't get the exact patterns on my brush. So this is our first wash. And I kept it right. Before it dries out, I'm going to introducing a midtown value in my trees. And in this tree, the light is coming from the top left, so I'll be adding a lot of pigments on the bottom right and on the right hand side. So I'm painting a wet on wet. Like the other key thing to keep in mind when you paint trees is to leave some white bits here and there. I have a hard time, I tend to cover all my trees. I tend not to do that. And you can see we added a darker value. For the darker value, I'm using Meridian and Neutral Tint. And you can see already we kind of like painted a simple little tree. And I'm also taking some white bits here and there to soften the hard edges, because trees tend to have a lot of flare out edges. So I'm trying to get that. And you could see in a matter of seconds we created this tree. And being said that, I also sped this video 5 times, so don't get discouraged. So I'm taking some clean water and I'm just splattering on my trees. So that will give a little bit of edge variation in our trees, and it gives a lot of leaves and every details you can see. And my artist mind, I never paint anything without shadows, and I added that shadow as well. And let's make another simple happy little tree as well. And for this, lighting is coming from the top part, and you can see I'm using the first wash, and I'm using a lot of water in it because I'm introducing a lot of colors in it as well. And this is my midtone, and you see I left a lot of white bits here and there, but at the end I covered it, and that's the thing, you shouldn't do it, but I kept it as it is. So now I'm introducing a little bit of a darker tone using for the branch and the trunk. For the trunk, I'm using, you could either use a amber with neutral tint in it, or you can use burnt amber as well. So I'm using the midtone value, and I also sprayed some water on my trees, and that also give a little bit of variations in of the edges as well. So now, as I said, I covered everything. So I'm taking a clean brush with a little bit of water in it, and I'm taking away paint here and there to create some forms in our painting. And now I'm introducing the darker tone at the back, in the front. So you could see as soon as we add the darker tone, the tree got a shape, a 3D form in our shape. And I'm adding a little bit of shadows at the bottom. I'm going to let it dry, and once it dried, this is how it looks like, and yet it looks really amazing and it looks magnificent. And I'm trying to bring out some of the white bits here and there to create some forms. And next tree we're going to look at is the triangle tree, or the Christmas trees. So it's the exact same concept. I'll be using light wash first. For all the light washes, I'm using cadmium orange and cerulean blue in it, so I can get as light as it can. So before it dries out, I'm going to introduce the midtone value. For the midtone value, I'm using Meridian and a little bit of neutral tint in it. Also, you can use Meridian and French Ultramarine blue in it as well. And I'm making sure to leave some white bits here and there. And you can see there's a lot of odd edges happening. And it's easy to fix. You take a clean brush with clean water in it, and you soften the edge. That's it. And now I'm going to introduce darker pigment underneath those forms. You could see when I did that, it paints by itself. That's a beautiful thing about watercolors. It paints by itself. And I'm going to rotate my brush, and I'm also trying to change the shapes here and there, because that will give a little bit of edge variations in our trees. And I'm also trying to make my strokes as expressive I can. Whenever I paint, I tend not to cut up on details. I paint freely and loose, And you could see I combined the bottom part with the branch, and my artistic mind again wants to add shadows, and I did that as well. And you can see I covered all the forms here as well, and I sprayed a little bit of water on my tree, and I'm going to take white paint, and I'm going to, while it's wet, I'm going to introduce a little bit of white paint here and there, and that will create and blends, you know, a little bit of texture variation in our trees, and it will create a beautiful form for our trees as well. And you can also build this trees, you know, as you go. And I'm also introducing a little bit of darker pigment as well to create some forms and shapes and shadows underneath it. So as soon as we add the darker forms, you could see this is how it looks like as it dried out. So the next tree we're going to look at is called dried trees. So this tree doesn't have any leaves or anything in it. So this is my favorite thing to paint, because I hate painting trees because there's a lot of details in it. So whenever you paint dried trees, try to think of a shape V. So every branches you paint, it, you know, shapes of a V. So you can also make up stuff like that. You can see for the branches, for thin twigs and everything, I'm using this pinstripe brush. That's one of my favorite brush to use. So you could use this brush to create a different kind of edges for the twigs and everything. So these trees are the colorful trees or fall trees, because I want to show you guys it's the exact same concept how you paint. And I'm using my favorite little brush, the pinstripe brush. You could see that gives a lot of variations in my brush, and it also gives like really crisp lines. And the trees really have this crisp lines when you do it, yet it looks really simple and it looks really amazing. And I'm going to introduce a mid-tone at the bottom of the trees, of the colorful trees. And in Canada, like, there's a lot of trees with beautiful yellow color, so I added that. So this is another tree which is close to my place, and it looked really like magenta. So it's the exact same concept. You start with a light wash, and you introduce a mid-tone value, and you introduce the darker value. You could paint this on wet on wet, on dry, it doesn't matter, and it works either way. And being said that, there is not only one way to paint trees, and you practice with this and you can come up with your own workflow as well. And this also looks really good, and you could see I'm also introducing a darker pigment now. As soon as we added it, the light peeked through in our trees, and it created beautiful forms in our tree as well. So now let's into grouping. So grouping of trees is really important, and when I'm painting this, I'm trying not to make this picture pretty. I'm showing you guys how to group a lot of trees into a single clumps. So this is our background, and I'm painting the foreground as well. So once it's wet, I'm going to paint the distance trees now. So whenever you paint grouping of trees, the key thing to keep in mind is to layer it in a way. So you paint the background, the midground, and the foreground. So now I painted a little bit of distance tree, and now I'm introducing the midground tree. For that, I'm using Viridian, and you can see as soon as I painted, I'm also painting the background in distance as well. So that kind of gives like a little bit of distance in our painting as well. And I'm trying to keep the top part with hard edges. At the bottom, it kind of goes blurry. So this is not like my Euro trees. So whenever I group, I try to keep two trees to be like a really like a Euro tree. So the focal point goes there. So this is one of our Euro tree, and there will be another one which is next to it as a Euro tree as well. At the bottom, since I wet the paper and it also goes in distance, it also shows that there is something behind it as well. And I will do the process for the trees on the right hand side too. So I'll do some brush marks on the right hand side as well, and I'm trying to make my brush stroke as expressive as I can. I'm also going to introduce a little bit of darker pigment at the bottom, so there is a lot of shadows happening at the bottom. You could see we took like a bunch of trees and we grouped it together in a nice way. And this is how it looks like at the end, and I added some details in the midground as well. And let's move on to the next one. So let's do another grouping. It's the exact same concept. So I'm going to take my round brush, flared out bristles, and so I'm going to be wearing the shapes of the trees. And this reference was taken when I went hiking on Pickering, and this trees which is as a backlighting on a hill, on the top of the hill, and it looked really good with the sunlight behind it and with the shadows peeking through in the midground. So it's the same thing. I introduced the lighter tone, and I'm introducing a little bit of clouds at the back, and that also gives a little bit of light peeking through our trees. And you can see I am also adding where the hill stops with Veridian in it, and I'm also softening the edge with a little bit of Veridian and a little bit of Amber in it. So I'm also showing the slope by introducing a little bit of a darker pigment of burnt amber in it. So now I'm going to be introducing a mid-tone. So as we did the grouping on the previous one, I said there's always I'll make my Euro trees. The Euro trees is right exactly in the middle, and that's one I'm going to spending more details on it. So I'm also painting this wet on wet, so I'm really painting really fast, and you could see I'm doing the exact same thing. So the one on the right, it will act as a stand-in, so I'm going to be introducing a lot of darker pigments on the right hand side. The same thing. In any trees, it also have a gradient, and there will be a light value at the top. As it comes down, it gets darker and darker because there is a plane which the tree sits on, and that creates a contact shadow. And we almost like I zapped in this really fast, and I didn't take that much time to paint these trees. And you could see I want to make sure that there is a lot of light coming behind it, and I'm keeping in mind. And now I'm introducing the branches using Payne's gray. And I'm also keeping this really simple. And now I'm introducing a little bit of a darker pigment on the trees. So now let's connect the trees to the hill. So I'm going to introducing a darker pigment using Payne's gray. And I'm also taking some clean water to soften the edges, certain areas, because so it doesn't look really harsh at the top of the hill. And once I'm happy with the darker pigment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the shadows. So I'm going to be painting this as dark as possible at the top. And now for the shadows for the trees on the slope, I'm using Winsor violet and a little bit of cobalt blue in it. You can use any purple with cobalt blue works as well. So I'm going to exaggerate these shadows as well, and because this shows there's a slope, and I'm going to take the darker shape and I connect the shadow which we painted. So there's a gradient happening from top to bottom, and it also shows like the slope as well for the hill. Now we are at end of our painting journey, and I'm going to be introducing a little bit of darker tone in my trees and a little bit of cleanup here and there, and we can call this done. So now it's your turn. Take this video tutorial, practice some trees with me, and download the practice template as well. And I do have a lot of variation of trees in the practice template as well as for grouping. If you ended up painting any of the trees with me in this tutorial, or if you used my practice template and if you paint something and share it with me, and I love to share with my subscribers. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks again for watching this video tutorial with me. If you want me to cover any other subjects, write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or comment below. And also let me know what you guys think about this video in the comment below. And make sure to hit the subscribe button, and good luck with your paint.